Dean Weber, faculty and parents, friends, and most importantly, the Lerner class of 2022. As I approach this event today, one of the things that come to mind is how much has changed since the 4 decades since I graduated. The athletic complex that surrounds you today barely resembles the 2 lonely stands where we graduated. Across the street is a cutting-edge research campus that once stood an aging auto plant. And tomorrow, your commencement will be addressed by a fellow Delaware grad, the President of the United States. 44 years ago at my graduation, our speaker was, well, we actually had the same speaker, but it was far less exciting back then. And one other thing has changed. At 8 a.m. on a Friday, the day before commencement, and after a week of celebration, my graduating class was sound asleep. It would be an understatement to say that the last 4 years have been a bit dynamic and probably not what you expected when you came here in September of 2018. This speech in some ways mirrors those times. When Dean Weber asked me in January 2020 to address that year's graduating class, I figured I had 20 weeks to prepare, so remembering some of my best habits from my college days, I said, why start now? Well, things happen. 20 weeks turned out to be 120 weeks. The class of 2020 ended up being the class of 2022. But this speech is very different than the one I would have delivered then, assuming I had written it. The world has changed dramatically in many ways, and you have been not only observers of that change, but participants. Your educational experience was incredibly unique, responding to changes and leveraging innovative technologies to heights that were only a concept decades ago. And more importantly, the adaptability you displayed in achieving the graduation that you celebrate today will be a great asset as you begin your careers. The innovation you experienced in the delivery of your education will continue to be a part of the college process, supplementing the invaluable classroom and campus experience that remains a hallmark of the university. So in retrospect, I think you should consider the disruptions of the educational process that occurred in 2020 as an incredible real-life case study in adapting to external events and exhibiting agility in leveraging technologies in new and innovative ways. The last 4 years did not go as anyone planned, but you exit your college experience with an acquired set of skills that you would never have gained in a typical classroom setting. As the past 2 years have displayed, we live in an incredibly dynamic world where social, technological, and environmental changes will reshape not only our educational process, but our work and social lives. So as new graduates, how do you plan for that? Well, you should have some kind of life plan, but recognize that whatever plan, just as your college experience has shown, your actual experience will greatly differ. The jobs that you've accepted or are aspiring to may not exist in 10 or 20 years. The job that you have when you retire probably doesn't exist today. And more importantly, the methods of executing those jobs will change. A quick overview of my career highlights the needs to adapt to change, not only due to external events, but also due to changing views and opportunities. In my case, it started here on campus, where I started as a pre-med major. 4 weeks into chemistry, I figured I needed a change, so I switched to a very closely related major, accounting. Luckily for me, it was my only change of major during my college career. More importantly, it was a godsend to the medical profession. Upon graduation, I started my career nearby with PwC in Philadelphia. It was at a time when there was no initial specialization, so my clients included a bakery, Tasty Cake, an auto dealer selling a brand of car that doesn't exist anymore, and a bank that has merged into other banks multiple times. But while specialization has become more common, not only in careers but in the college experience, I can't stress the value of the liberal arts aspect of the college experience and the rounding of your knowledge that it achieves. You will find that many of the valuable insights you gained in your college experience come from classes totally unrelated to your majors. After 6 years in public accounting, again, my plans changed. I enjoyed the financial clients I had, so decided to take a job from JP Morgan to form an internal audit department in their growing presence in Delaware. Now, here is where my career begins to diverge from the comfort zone. In one of the many forms you fill out when you start work, there was a question of whether you would consider an overseas assignment. I answered yes, as spending time in London or Paris seemed exciting. As Bruce mentioned, I can attribute that to my motivation here at the University of Delaware. In my junior year, I spent winter session in Geneva studying international economics and finance, which piqued my interest in the global business environment. Fast forward, some 5 years after starting at JP Morgan, they apparently found that form and asked me to go to Tokyo. Initially, I was somewhat taken back. Moving from Wilmington to Tokyo seemed quite a stretch, as it was far from a familiar geographical location and a very different business focus. But they said it would only be 18 months, a comment that later proved to be to remember from my marketing class as bait and switch. I discussed it with my wife. She responded, "Let's go." It was a great decision, getting me out of a comfort zone of a job that was becoming somewhat routine to a totally different business and cultural environment. After 3 years in Tokyo, we moved to London for almost 8 years. Again, outside a comfort zone to a dynamic environment of consolidating European markets and opportunity for extensive travel through Europe. It also began my reconnecting with the university. Through their London campus, I was able to host visiting students and have speakers come and speak on topics. After 10 years overseas, not 18 months, I returned to the States in 2000. Back in the US, I spent the remainder of my career in New York, moving from JP Morgan to Morgan Stanley, separated by a brief stop in DC, another type of foreign experience. My 15 years at Morgan Stanley, all in New York, completed somewhat of a full circle from a career perspective. I started at JP Morgan in internal audit, and after many years in finance, was asked to take over as head of internal audit at Morgan Stanley, a role from which I ultimately retired. It was a fantastic way to end my career. Looking at my career, what possible takeaways can I leave you with? For one, I recommend you not be afraid to take chances and move out of your comfort zone. Jobs that become routine and familiar can give you a sense of calm, but often will not challenge you on your career horizons. They may not all work out perfectly, but you will learn from all of them. Further, the process that many roles are performed going forward will partially eliminate the geographical restrictions of the typical office environment. While accelerated by the pandemic, this actually started years prior with the establishment of resource hubs often far from core business processes. The remote working environment of the pandemic leveraged those processes and technologies to add a new and important element to the work environment and allowing for additional avenues of work-life balance. Remote working has become an important element in executing a role, but in many cases, not a substitute for face-to-face interaction. Most roles involve an apprenticeship element that can't be fully achieved without personal interaction. And additionally, I can say that many of the personal relationships I have today came from the environment surrounding those roles. So how do you end a graduation address? A bit of research reminded me of one of the most quoted lines: "Find a job you love and you will never work a day in your life." The exact origin of this quote is somewhat unclear, with attributions ranging from Confucius to Mark Twain. Well, whoever it was, I really wish I lived their life. I was lucky to, shall we say, have liked very much almost all of my jobs. But I can unequivocally say that I worked most days in my career. And if there's one thing you take from this address, it's this. At the end of your first year, in your performance review, when your manager asks you how your first year went, don't say you loved it so much that you did not work a single day all year. So, with all respect to Confucius and Samuel Clemens, I leave you with a quote from a sage and Nobel laureate of my generation, Bob Dylan. "May your hands always be busy. May your feet always be swift. May you have a strong foundation when the winds of change shift. May you build a ladder to the stars, and may you climb on every rung, and may you stay forever young. Thank you.